Hey everybody, Ben Blankenship with Backcountry Journeys here, reporting from Yosemite National Park. We have two groups coming up we're running trips with in the park, and so today I'm out here doing a little scouting and refreshing on the park. I'm also going to do a little video piece for you called Shot Breakdown, which I'm going to take you through my thought process and technique for creating wide-angle, stunning landscapes in Yosemite National Park. So we're here at Valley View. It's one of the most famous vantage points in the park because you can see El Capitan, Cathedral Rock, and Half Dome out in the distance. So as I was walking around here thinking about my composition, I was looking for something that would create a really strong foreground in the image. When creating these sweeping wide landscapes, it's important to have foreground, midground, and background to help move your viewer's eyes through the image. So here I have these nice tree roots in the foreground which create an S shape through the bottom third of the frame. On the top third I have these nice tree limbs with the green leaves, and then for midground I have the river bank, and then beyond that is the Bridal Veil Falls for my background. That will be the focal point of my image, so the idea is that I move my viewer's eyes from the foreground through the midground to the background. And you might be asking yourself how to get all those things in focus. So the first thing you want to do is use a very small aperture. I'm shooting an f/18 to create as much depth of field as possible. And the simplest approach to getting as much of the image in focus as possible is using something called hyperfocal distance. And hyperfocal distance is different for each lens and each aperture of that lens. But there's a handy tool called photo pills on your phone, which I can use to look it up for my specific lens. So at f/16 and 16mm, which is what I'm at here, my hyperfocal distance is 0.9 meters. So it's just about a meter away. So there's two ways to do this. I can use the dial on my lens to set it at 1 meter, which I'm about set at now. Or I can look at something that's about a meter away and using live view, focus on that, and know that I have hyperfocal distance. Now we also have a lot of dynamic range here. So we've got our camera focus set. I've got it back on manual focus so it's not going to breathe in or out. And now I'm going to think about the exposure. So like I said, I'm at f/16 for deep depth of field and ISO 100. Anytime I'm shooting on tripod of a static scene, I'm going to be at ISO 100 to reduce the noise as much as possible. And so with those settings, that's giving me a shutter speed at 0 of about 1/6 of a second. So the way to deal with this dynamic range would be to shoot a bracket. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a black frame, which will let me know when I'm looking at my images that I have a sequence starting of the bracket. Next, I'm going to use my shutter speed to bring my exposure down to 2 stops under. That's a 25th of a second. Now I've got my shutter release here so I can trigger the shutter without vibrating the camera. So I'll shoot the first one at 2 stops under. I'm going to move it up to 1 stop under. Move it up again to at 0. And then the last frame at 1 stop over to deal with all the shadows. And once that sequence is done, I create one more black frame. And now when I'm looking at my images in post, I can see that I have an HDR sequence to put together. Okay, so we've got the shot well composed. We've shot a bracket at hyperfocal distance. Now I'm going to take you through another approach called focus stacking. And in focus stacking, what we're going to do is create a series of images at different focal lengths and use Photoshop to combine them to create an image that is sharp from front to back. So you see here, I've got my camera in manual focus, and it gives me a little window here which I can zoom in on. So I'm going to start with the foreground and zoom in on that. Now you see it's very dark, so I'm going to have to brighten it up. And I'm going to grab focus there. You can see my foreground is now sharp. I'm going to bring my exposure back down using my shutter speed. And I'm going to shoot first my signal for letting me know that a focus stack is happening, which is the little circle. Now I know when I'm looking at my images that I know I'm doing a focus stack. And I'm going to shoot a little bracket for this too. So I'm going to start at 1 stop under, grab that shot. And another at 0, grab that, and one more at 1 stop over. Now I'm going to move my little square a little further deeper into the image, so it's the water here. I'm going to grab focus on the water, pull that sharp, and I'm going to repeat the process. 1 stop under, 0, and 1 stop over. Now remember, I'm shooting at f/16, which allows me to have a lot of depth of field, which will make blending these images a lot easier. Now I'm going to move back into the opposite bank of the river, grab focus, bring exposure down to 1 stop under, grab that shot, 0, and now 1 stop over. And then finally, I'm going to check the most distant object, which is the waterfall. Hit sharp focus there, and repeat the process one more time. 1 stop under, 0, and 1 stop over. Now that's the full sequence of the focus stacked image, and I'm going to end the sequence with the circle symbol, so I know that's the end of that sequence. So that's it, folks. That's our shot breakdown here from Valley View in Yosemite National Park.